Imagine a lush, terraced garden soaring into the sky amidst the arid plains of ancient Mesopotamia. The Hanging Gardens of Babylon, one of the seven wonders, has intrigued historians for centuries because its very existence remains uncertain. Were they real or a poetic legend passed down through time? Accounts describe vibrant greenery, cascading waterfalls and intricate irrigation systems, an engineering marvel in a land of deserts. How could such a creation defy nature, and why has no definitive archaeological proof survived? Join us on History Vault as we venture into mysteries of the Hanging Gardens, exploring ancient texts, possible locations, and the secrets that might reveal whether they were reality or myth. Subscribe and hit the bell icon to uncover the wonders lost to time and step into a world where history and imagination intertwine. The desert sands fade into the haze of far-off horizon, and in their place rises a vision unlike anything the ancient world had ever known, a city of baked brick and blue-glazed walls, crowned not by a single monument of stone, but by a living miracle. Here, in the heart of Mesopotamia, the air shimmers with heat, yet the scent of flowers, herbs, and damp earth fills the wind. The city is Babylon, the jewel of kings, and above its bustling streets floats a wonder that seems to defy both nature and reason, the Hanging Gardens. They say it was King Nebuchadnezzar II who built them, not for glory or conquest, but for love. His queen, Amytas of Media, came from the green, rolling hills of her homeland, and in the flat, sun-scorched plains of Babylon, she longed for the forests and mountains she had left behind. Nebuchadnezzar, in a gesture both romantic and imperial, ordered that an artificial mountain be built in the very heart of his capital. Tier upon tier of stone, mud brick, and timber, each level overflowing with trees, vines, and flowers from every corner of his empire. It would be a paradise in the desert, a place where his queen could stand and believe she was once more in her homeland. But to imagine these gardens as merely a palace courtyard is to underestimate them. Ancient accounts describe a structure so vast and magnificent that it seemed to be suspended between heaven and earth. Columns supported terraces rising one above another, each layer with soil deep enough to anchor the roots of towering date palms and fig trees. Exotic blossoms spilled over balustrades, their colors vivid against the baked clay of the city below. Birds from faraway lands made their nests here, their songs mingling with the hum of bees. And at the heart of it all was a soft rush of water, the greatest mystery of the gardens. For Babylon sat far from the mountains, and the only water source was the Euphrates River, flowing at the city's edge. To feed such a marvel in the arid climate, engineers are said to devise an ingenious system, an endless chain of buckets, powered by hidden machinery, lifting water from the river up to the highest terraces. From there, it trickled down in channels, nourishing every plant in a cycle as constant as the beating of a heart. To the people of the ancient world, it was nothing short of a miracle, a piece of paradise coaxed into existence by the will of a king. And yet, for all its beauty, the Hanging Gardens remain the most elusive of the seven wonders. Not a single stone has been found, no definitive ruins uncovered, no inscription from Nebuchadnezzar himself boasting of its creation. Some historians have even dared to ask the unthinkable. Did the gardens ever truly exist? Were they the invention of poets and travelers, a dream passed down through centuries until it became indistinguishable from truth? The Greek historian Strabo described them as a multi-level marvel, shaded and cool even in the harshest summer. Philo of Byzantium called them a green theater, where plants performed their beauty in perfect harmony. But perhaps the most vivid account came from Berossus, a Babylonian priest writing in the 3rd century BCE, who claimed the gardens rose 75 feet high, their terraces lush enough to rival the hills of Media. And yet, all we have today are words, no living trace of the masterpiece they described. Some scholars believe the gardens may have been misattributed, not in Babylon at all, but in Nineveh, the capital of the Assyrian Empire. There, King Sennacherib boasted an elaborate palace garden, watered by an aqueduct and adorned with plants from distant lands. Perhaps it was this garden, not Nebuchadnezzar's, that sparked the legend. If true, the wonder we know as the Hanging Gardens might be less a monument of love and more a feat of imperial propaganda. But maybe that's the secret power of the Hanging Gardens. They blur the line between history and myth. Whether real or imagined, they have endured in our collective memory for over 2,000 years. They're the dream we want to believe in, that a king would move rivers, carve mountains, and bend nature itself, not for conquest or vanity, but to bring a piece of home to someone he loved. As the sun sets over Babylon in your mind's eye, the terraces glow gold, the leaves rustle in the evening breeze, and the river murmurs at the city's edge. Somewhere within those walls, the queen walks among her flowers, her heart at peace, while below, the city hums with life. And though time will erase Babylon from the map and scatter its people to winds, this vision of gardens hanging in the air will survive, a promise that beauty, once imagined, can never truly be destroyed. Night falls over Babylon, and the hanging gardens transform under the moonlight into something even more surreal. The terraces glisten as water cascades down in silver ribbons, pooling in marble basins before spilling into the next level below. The warm desert air cools here, caught in the shadows of towering palm fronds and heavy clusters of figs and pomegranates. Lanterns hung from the columns cast a golden glow, their light flickering against the rippling leaves. The scent of jasmine mixes with the earthy smell of damp soil, a fragrance that must have seemed impossible in the heart of Mesopotamia. Down in the city streets, merchants and travelers speak of the wonder with a kind of reverence usually reserved for gods. To see the gardens, they say, is to step into another world, a place where man and nature are no longer in opposition, but in harmony. Some whisper that they were not merely a gift of the queen, but a display of divine favor, proof that Babylon itself was the chosen city of the gods. In a world where power was often measured in gold and armies, Nebuchadnezzar's creation suggested a different kind of strength, the power to command life itself to flourish in the most unforgiving terrain. But how were such gardens truly sustained in a city without rainfall, where the summer scorched the earth until it cracked? This question has puzzled historians for centuries. Ancient accounts mention machines that lifted water, but none describe them in detail. Some believe the Babylonians employed an early form of the Archimedes screw, a spiral tube that, when turned, could draw water upward. Others imagine an endless chain pump, its clay buckets looping day and night, powered by oxen walking in circles deep within the structure's hidden chambers. Whatever the method, it would have required constant labor and engineering precision. This was not a static monument. It was a living system, one that demanded careful maintenance to keep its beauty alive. In truth, the very idea of the gardens hints at an empire's confidence in its stability. Only a kingdom certain of its wealth, resources, and political dominance could afford to pour such energy into something so impractical for warfare or governance. While fortresses defended cities and temples honored the gods, the hanging gardens existed purely to please the senses, to inspire awe, and to remind all who saw them that Babylon's reach extended not just across lands, but across the boundaries of nature itself. And yet, the mystery deepens when one considers the absence of direct Babylonian records. The walls of Babylon are well documented, as are its temples, its ziggurats, its palaces, but nowhere in Nebuchadnezzar's inscriptions is there mention of a towering garden. This silence has led some to suggest that the legend was a later invention by Greek travelers, eager to embellish their tales of the East. If so, why did the story persist for so long, repeated in detail by historians separated by centuries and miles? Perhaps it is because the gardens fit so perfectly into the image of Babylon, a city of opulence and excess, where kings dine from golden plates and priests interpret the movements of the stars. Whether they stood as a physical reality or existed only in imagination, the hanging gardens embodied the very essence of what made Babylon the crown of the ancient Near East: ambition, ingenuity, and a taste of the extraordinary. Still, one cannot dismiss entirely the possibility that they were real, and that time simply claimed them without mercy. Mud brick, the primary building material of Mesopotamia, does not endure like stone. Even massive structures, if abandoned, can crumble to dust within a few generations, especially in a climate where wind and sand eat away at exposed surfaces. If the gardens were indeed built atop a stone foundation, but layered with mud brick and timber, centuries of neglect could have erased them completely, leaving not a single visible trace. And so the vision lingers, caught between the realms of fact and fable. You can almost hear the creak of the water-lifting devices in the night, the gentle rustle of leaves above the hum of the city below. You can picture the queen standing at the highest terrace, her eyes scanning the horizon until they rest on the distant mountains she once called home. For a moment, In this place, the desert becomes a forest, and the relentless sun a gentle warmth filtered through green canopies. What is certain is that the gardens, real or imagined, have transcended their time. They have become a symbol of the human desire to create beauty even in the harshest of places, a reminder that the most enduring wonders may not be those carved from stone, but those nurtured from living things. In their story, whether grounded in earth or suspended in the mind's eye, the Hanging Gardens remind us that history is as much about what we hope was true as it is about what can be proved. The great city of Babylon did not fall in a single day, nor did its wonders vanish in one swift moment. Decline comes like a slow shadow, creeping over glory until even the brightest marvels are swallowed in darkness. For decades after Nebuchadnezzar's reign, the Hanging Gardens still stood, perhaps less lush than in their prime, but still a sight that stirred the hearts of those who beheld them. Travelers from distant lands continued to speak of the towering terraces and the endless streams of water, though some whispered that the machines lifting the water no longer turned as tirelessly as before. Without the king's direct oversight, the perfect rhythm of labor began to falter. Political instability followed. Successive rulers cared more for power than for beauty, and maintaining a living monument in the desert required both wealth and vision. Two commodities in short supply. The water channels that once gleamed in the sun began to crack under the strain of neglect. Terraces that had been covered in vibrant greenery were slowly reclaimed by dust and weeds. It is in this long twilight of the gardens that the first seeds of myth may have been planted. Visitors who saw them in decay may have told tales of a grandeur that was already fading, their memories gilding the truth. Then came the Persian conquest under Cyrus the Great in 539 BC. Babylon fell not with fire, but with strategy. The Persians diverted the Euphrates River, entering the city through its dry riverbed. Some say this act was the first real blow to the Hanging Gardens, for without the constant, powerful flow of the Euphrates, the intricate water system may have been crippled. Others argue that the Persians, more focused on administration than on monumental beauty, simply had no reason to maintain such extravagant and labor-intensive wonder. In either case, the lifeblood of the gardens began to thin. And yet, the legend did not die with Babylon's fall. Greek historians like Herodotus and later Strabo spoke of the gardens with almost poetic devotion. Strabo described an engineering marvel, terraces resting on stone vaults, irrigated by hidden water-lifting devices. But his account was written centuries after the Persian conquest, when Babylon's grandeur had already waned. How much of what he described came from his own eyes, and how much from stories passed down through countless mouths, is impossible to say. The real turning point came when Alexander the Great swept into Babylon in 331 BCE. For a brief moment, it seemed the city and perhaps the gardens would find new life. Alexander, awed by Babylon's wealth and its strategic position, intended to make it the capital of his vast empire. He even ordered repairs to its structures, including the great ziggurat at Menanke. Some suggest that the gardens, too, were revived under his orders. But fate intervened. In 323 BCE, Alexander died suddenly in Babylon at the age of 32, leaving his plans unfinished. His generals divided his empire, and Babylon, once the jewel of the world, became just another possession to be fought over. In the centuries that followed, the city's decline accelerated. The Euphrates shifted its course, drifting away from the city's walls. Without easy access to the river, the ancient irrigation systems failed completely. The terraces that had once overflowed with greenery now stood barren, their stones exposed to the unrelenting sun. Roofs collapsed, walls cracked, and the mighty columns were reduced to rubble. Wind and sand did the rest, erasing layer after layer until only vague mounds remained. By the time Roman scholars wrote of the Hanging Gardens, they spoke of them as something belonging to a different age, a marvel they themselves had never seen, yet recounted with wonder as if they had walked its terraces. The gardens had passed from reality into legend, surviving not in stone or plant, but in words and imagination. And perhaps that is why their story endured. A physical wonder can be destroyed, but legend can live forever, reshaped and retold for generations. Today, archaeologists still search for traces of them, but no definitive evidence has been found in Babylon itself. Some researchers believe the gardens may have been built not in Babylon at all, but in Nineveh by the Assyrian king Sennacherib. a theory that, if true, would rewrite one of the most famous entries on a list of the seven wonders of the ancient world. Yet, even if this theory holds weight, the name Hanging Gardens of Babylon has become so deeply rooted in our cultural memory that it is unlikely ever be replaced. And so, the Hanging Gardens disappeared not with a great crash, but with a slow, inevitable passage of time, a reminder that even the most beautiful creations of man are vulnerable to neglect, conquest, and nature's quiet reclamation. But in their loss, they gained something unexpected: immortality in the human imagination. Centuries after the Hanging Gardens had vanished from sight, the sands of Mesopotamia still whispered their story. Explorers, historians, and archaeologists from distant lands were drawn to Babylon, chasing the faint echoes of its splendor. But what they found was not towering terraces or cascading water, but endless stretches of dust, scattered bricks, and the stubborn heat of the desert. The mighty city that had once awed the ancient world lay silent, its grand avenues buried beneath layers of forgotten history. Yet, the absence of evidence did not extinguish the desire to find them. In fact, it only deepened the mystery. The first modern explorers who arrived in the 19th century came armed with little more than shovels, notebooks, and the writings of ancient historians. Men like Robert Coldway, the German archaeologist who began excavations at Babylon in 1899, believed he was destined to uncover the gardens. For over 14 years, he dug tirelessly, uncovering walls, foundations, and what he believed might have been the vaulted structures that supported the terraces. He described a series of stone archways, unusual for Babylonian architecture, that could form the backbone of the gardens. To Coldway, these were not just random ruins. They were the skeleton of one of history's greatest architectural feats. But not everyone agreed. Critics argue that Coldway's findings could just as easily have belonged to storerooms, military structures, or even part of the city's fortifications. The biggest challenge was, and still is, the lack of direct evidence. No Babylonian text from the time of Nebuchadnezzar explicitly mentioned the Hanging Gardens. There are inscriptions detailing his building projects, his temples, his palaces, and even his canals, but not one line describing a massive terrace garden. It was as though the wonder existed only in the words of outsiders, Greek and Roman writers who had never seen Babylon in its prime. Then came an intriguing theory. In the late 20th century, British researcher Stephanie Daly proposed that perhaps the reason the gardens have never been found in Babylon is because they were never there to begin with. She argued that the Greeks might confuse Babylon with Nineveh, the Assyrian capital. Sennacherib, the Assyrian king who ruled a century before Nebuchadnezzar, was known for creating grand gardens with advanced irrigation systems. In fact, inscriptions from his reign speak in detail of water being lifted from the Tigris by massive screw-like devices, remarkably similar to what Greek writers described. If Daly's theory is correct, the Hanging Gardens may have stood hundreds of kilometers to the north, their beauty misattributed to Babylon by later historians. This revelation added a fresh layer to the mystery. If the gardens were truly in Nineveh, it meant that the search in Babylon had always been in the wrong place. Yet, despite this possibility, the name Hanging Gardens of Babylon has proven impossible to erase from the public imagination. Babylon is where the legend feels at home, even if the reality was elsewhere. In recent years, satellite imagery, ground-penetrating radar, and 3D reconstructions have given us tantalizing glimpses of what might have been. Digital artists recreate the lush terraces in shimmering detail, with waterfalls spilling into sunlit pools, palm trees swaying in the breeze, and exotic flowers blooming in impossible abundance. These reconstructions may not give us physical proof, but they breathe life back into the vision of a world where kings commanded rivers to climb skyward. The mystery of the Hanging Gardens today is more than an archaeological puzzle. It is a reflection of our human longing to find beauty, to reconnect with a past we can barely imagine, and to hold on to belief that somewhere in history, a place existed where the desert bloomed in defiance of nature itself. Whether buried under the ruins of Babylon, hidden in the shadows of Nineveh, or existing only in the dreams of poets, the Hanging Gardens remain one of humanity's most enduring obsessions. As the sun sets over the silent plains of Mesopotamia, the land that once cradled the Hanging Gardens falls into shadow. The Euphrates drifts lazily through the dust, as if carrying whispers from a time when kings dreamed of bending nature to their will. The wind moves through the ruins with quiet sigh, like the ghost of forgotten empire, and one cannot help but wonder if somewhere beneath the earth, a fragment of those gardens still lies sleeping, waiting for the day it will be seen again. The allure of the Hanging Gardens is not simply in their grandeur, but in what they represent. Human ambition at its most daring. If they truly existed, they were not merely a display of wealth or power. They were a living miracle, a defiance of the desert, a reminder that beauty can flourish even in the harshest conditions. Every description we have, from ancient scrolls to modern reconstructions, paints them as a place where nature and architecture dance together in perfect harmony. Water, coaxed upward by human ingenuity, flowed where rain never fell. Trees from distant lands spread their shade where once there had been only sand. It was as if a piece of paradise had been stolen from the gods and planted on earth. Yet perhaps the reason we are so captivated by the gardens is because they embody something universal, the yearning to create something that will outlive us, to leave behind a legacy that time cannot erase. In every age, humans have built wonders to touch eternity. Pyramids in Egypt, temples in Greece, towers in modern cities that pierce the clouds. The Hanging Garden belonged to that same dream, whether they stood in Babylon, Nineveh, or only in the imagination of ancient storytellers. Today, their image survives in art, literature, and film, inspiring architects, poets, and dreamers alike. Tourists still travel to Babylon's ruins, standing before its ancient gates and imagining how it must have felt to walk beneath the cool shadows of 1,000 leaves, hearing the sound of water cascading from terrace to terrace. Historians continue to debate their location, while engineers marvel at the irrigation methods described, wondering if they could be replicated even now. In the end, the mystery may never be solved, and maybe that's for the best. For as long as we do not know the full truth, the gardens remain free to live in our minds exactly as we wish to see them. Untouched by decay, unbound by geography, forever green. They are a story that belongs to everyone. A reminder that even in a world of ruin, there once was a place where a king made the desert bloom. And perhaps that is why the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, real or not, have never faded from history's memory. Because they are not only about stone and water, but about the human heart's endless capacity to imagine, to create, and to hope. As long as that hope endures, the gardens will never truly be lost. The Hanging Gardens of Babylon continue to haunt historians' imaginations. Whether myth or reality, their legend reflects humanity's desire to conquer nature, create beauty, and reach for the extraordinary. They inspire engineers, architects, and storytellers even today. If the mystery of the gardens intrigues you, subscribe to History Vault and hit the bell icon. Explore ancient civilizations, uncover hidden secrets, and witness the incredible imagination of our ancestors. Some wonders vanish, but their stories continue to grow, waiting for curious minds to rediscover them.